Hello, rugby fans, and welcome back to Rugby 411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata, and this is the MLR Power Rankings for Week 4 of the 2022 season. I'll be honest, not as exciting a week as Week 3, but honestly, the games have kind of started to show where the teams are in the rankings, as is going to be evident from the rankings. Not a lot of movement from week 3 to week 4. I think the biggest movement is a 2-spot jump, but that's kind of how the power rankings are supposed to be. There's not supposed to be a lot of up and down or big jumps up and down. Everybody will kind of start fleshing and finding where they are in the hierarchy of the MLR, unless there's a huge upset, and there wasn't anything this week, but not to say that there won't be any time in the future. So again, quick overview. These power rankings are not based on standings. That's going to be evident as you see where the power rankings come up, and some people might look at it and go, well, that doesn't look exactly like the table for the MLR rankings based off of their records. And that's not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be based purely on what goes on the pitch week by week. Every performance is going to be different, and every performance currently matters more than what you do prior. A week 1 win means very little in week 6 or week 8, and especially depending on who it is that you beat in week 1, because that team might end up not having a win by the time we roll around to week 6 or 8. But let's move on to this week. So, number 13, we actually have a new number 13, though it's probably going to be, and I'll be honest with you, it's probably going to be almost a week-by-week flip-flop between the two bottom teams at the 12 and 13 spot. This week's number 13 is going to be Old Glory DC. They are just not looking very good at all so far. They suffered a loss against the Toronto Arrows. Not a huge loss, but just definitely not a very good game. They've been giving up a lot of points, but it is the Arrows, so the Arrows were only able to put down 29 on them, but Old Glory only able to put up 5 points in the game. Really, really just not there so far. Coming out very slow at the gates. We had 3 teams on bye. 2 of them that were on bye have not moved their spots in the rankings. Number 12, NOLA Gold, and number 11, the Utah Warriors. Both teams did not have a game this week. And as I mentioned before, the 12 and 13 spot is probably going to flip almost on a daily between NOLA and Old Glory, depending on who they play against. NOLA's not looking very good. Utah is the weird one. Undefeated. They take a much-needed bye in week 4 to kind of lick some wounds and try to figure out what is going on with this team that I predict, and I feel a lot of people were predicting to be much higher in the rankings. They have a game next week against the reigning and defending MLR champions, the LA Guiltinis. It's definitely gonna we're gonna really kind of see what kind of team they are with that game. Oh, I'm sorry, in week 5. That's the one coming up, not week 4. They have another team coming up with them. But again, chances for them to really try to show up and figure out who exactly they are. Week number 10, speaking of teams who were trying to figure out who they are, maybe a little bit coming back to reality, the Dallas Shackles. My second favorite team in MLR took a beating this time against Rooney, losing 5-41. They looked really good in the first 10 minutes or so, but then it was all Rooney. And again, kind of makes sense. Rooney is one of the more dominant teams in MLR, arguably a top 3 team. And Dallas, like I said, they're just, they have a lot of pieces. They just don't have the cohesion just yet because they haven't been around. I mean, this is just their 4th game in existence. So it takes some time for some of these teams. And unfortunately, they are going through the grinder as is. But as we'll preview with the next video, I feel Dallas will probably get their first win of the season within the next 2 weeks. You can quote me on that. But I feel Dallas will win at least their first game, one game of the season in the next 2 weeks. So maybe better times ahead for Dallas, but definitely they've had a very, very, very tough schedule right off the bat. Number 9, the Toronto Arrows moving up one spot with their win over Old Glory DC. It wasn't a flashy win. A win's a win. They were dominant in the second half of the first half, and then after halftime, kind of cruised on in for that win, 29-5. Again, a win over a bottom-ranked team isn't that impressive in the power rankings, so they only moved up one spot. Again, as the weeks go on, we'll kind of see where the Arrows are. I believe next week they have a bye, so again, much needed rest for a team that is still on the longest road trip of any team in professional sports. I believe their next game after the bye, they will finally, unless something drastic happens, finally be able to play in Toronto for a home game. Moving on to number 8. Dropping down a spot is the Houston SaberCats. Tough loss for them. They started off really good against San Diego, but again, a lot of cracks in Houston. Cracks that were evident in their win against the LA Guiltinis, which still seems to be now, as the season's moving on, a big upset. They're kind of, again, finding where they are and, kind of in the middle of the pack, as you see right here. Nothing too exciting in their loss or nothing out of the ordinary in their loss to San Diego. San Diego's a very tough team, but Houston still struggling to reach that upper echelon of teams in the power ranking. Moving on, another team that suffered a loss, and their first loss of the season, the Seattle Seawolves. But, nothing to be ashamed about. Losing to the number 1 team, spoiler alert, number 1 team in the Major League Rugby, the Austin Gilgronis. Seattle, they started off good in the game. They started out, I believe, by the half, they were up 8-6. And then just that seawall fell apart, and they just didn't have the firepower to keep up with Austin. Though, again, for a team like Austin that was averaging about 50 points a game so far, to only allow Austin 25 points is pretty good. I have to say, though, even though they lost 25-18, the scoreline looks a little bit better. The last score was literally after the game was over, in the 81st minute or so. So theoretically, the game was more like 25-13. 18 makes it look a little bit more respectable. But, again, losing to Austin is not a huge blow to the rankings. They only slid down one spot. Seattle is definitely still going to be a contender in the West, surprisingly. They have the medal to be contenders at the time the season's over. You'll learn in rugby, especially, it's everything is a marathon. It's very much like baseball. It's a marathon, not a sprint. 16 long weeks, 16 brutal weeks. You already have teams that are dealing with a lot of injuries. LA is one of them. Their opponents that they just played against, the Free Jacks, it's another team struggling with injuries. Everybody's already struggling with injuries, and we're only in week number 4. So it's really about how well you can manage your team and your players near the end of the season. You have to be able to make it to the end in one piece or as much of a piece as possible. And if anybody knows how to do that, it would be the only 2-time MLR champion team in the league, and that's the Seattle Seawolves. Moving up, our biggest jump in the rankings, moving up 2 spots from number 8 to number 6, is the San Diego Legion, well-known rivals to the Seattle Seawolves. They had a very good win against the Houston SaberCats 31-20. They're looking like a very good team. A much better team than last year. I think they're looking like the team that everyone thought they would be last year, this year. And again, they are going to be contenders in that Western Conference along with Seattle, along with a few of the others that are at top. And San Diego's going to win a lot of games, a lot more than they won last year. I can easily see them moving into the upper echelon of teams, but we still have quite a few games left in the season. Moving on, number 5. And this is where it was very difficult for me to figure out what to do with the remainder teams and kind of what to do with these teams. You know, it's a lot of, well, how impressive was this win? Again, power rankings are about what goes on the pitch. How impressive is a win? What are the quality of the opponents that they beat? Were they home? Were they away? You know, how good of the win? And then also, too, with teams that are on buys, because one of the teams in the top 5 is on a buy, the Rugby Atlanta. I don't believe that a team on a bye should move too much unless there's some big upsets. So you have that kind of factoring into this. So really for these last 5, it was tough to figure out what to do with them. So I'll admit to you, kind of cop out. Really didn't change too much. Number 5, we have the Free Jacks. A really tough loss for them at the world famous LA Coliseum. 15-19 against the reigning, defending LA Giltinis. Saw the game, had a lot of fun. Thank you as always to the Giltini family for always treating their fans with a lot of love and respect. And hell of a game for the Free Jacks. It was very, very close. A couple of tries turned over by the TMO. Thank God for the TMO. But, you know, it was a very close game. Both teams played a little bit sloppy. Balls kind of bounced one way or the other, and in the end, LA Giltinis were the ones that walked away with the win. But not a loss that they should be down on. So the Free Jacks really didn't move much at all. So I left them at number 5 because I didn't feel San Diego's win earned them a reason to jump over the Free Jacks. I didn't feel with the next team that's on bye should have any reason to slide down just yet. So best thing to do is just leave them where they are, and we'll let next week determine where the pieces fall. So number 4, the last team that's on a bye, Rugby ATL. No movement because they didn't play, but they're still a very dangerous team. And then the top 3, same as the top 3 from last week. You have the LA Giltinis, the reigning, defending MLR champions. The LA Giltinis stay at number 3. I gotta admit their win, you know, not an impressive win, or at least not impressive by Giltini standards. Their set plays looked great. They were dominant in the scrum. The lineout was much better than it was in Houston. So a lot of things are kind of fixing themselves. They're still not as dynamic or as fast as they were before. That fast offensive attack that the Giltinis had last year is nowhere near existence this year, and it's weird. Don't exactly know why. Defense, though, is still strong, and again, the set pieces have gotten better, so there is improvement. But man, they really had to fight for this game against the Free Jacks. I'm scared when they have to go against their opponent next week, which we'll talk about in just a second. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. Tougher than I felt it was going to be for the Giltinis to repeat as 2-time MLR champions. Top 2 teams should be no surprise to anybody, and they deserve this. This, to be honest, was not an issue. I had no issue with this one. Rooney proving themselves as number 2 team, even though it was a dominant win over a team like Dallas. Still, a very impressive win is a win. They stay at number 2, but not impressive enough to jump over the number 1 team, the Austin Gilgronis, who looked very impressive in their win. Yeah, you know, these 2 teams are looking right now as the creme of the creme of MLR. the funny thing is, they're not going to play each other at all this season. The way that the schedules worked out, they miss each other. So the only way we're going to see these two, the two best teams, play in MLR is if they happen to meet in the championship game. And I'll admit, as much as I would love to see the Giltinis play again, as much as I would love to see another MLR championship game in the world-famous Coliseum, not too upset to see Austin and New York battle out for a MLR championship. So that's our week's power rankings. Again, I feel this works out really well. Not a lot of movement from last week. Biggest jumper was San Diego. Let me know what you think, as always. If you agree, disagree, see if your favorite team is up here. If you feel anyone's going to topple down the mighty Austin and New York. Just a little spoiler preview. Austin and LA play against each other next week, so that's really going to be interesting. See who fights over that number 1 spot. And yeah, so thank you again, as always, for checking out my YouTube channel, and I will see you on the pitch.